There are 6 main ways of performing qualitative data analysis. These include 1. Qualitative content analysis, 2. Narrative analysis, 3. Discourse analysis, 4. Thematic analysis, 5. Grounded theory, and 6. Interpretive phenomenological analysis. In this video, we are going to look at each of these methods. By the end of this video, you will be able to decide which is the best method for your research. I'm also going to give you links to examples of theses and dissertations that are conducted through the use of each of the qualitative data analysis methods so that you can clearly understand the differences between the 6 methods. Make sure you stay tuned until the end of the video because I'm also going to advise you on which method you should utilize for your qualitative data analysis as a beginner. Now, let's look at the first type of qualitative data analysis, which is qualitative content analysis. What does qualitative content analysis involve? Qualitative content analysis can be defined as systematically examining and interpreting particular body of material in an effort to identify themes, patterns, assumptions, and even derive meanings. Now, what is considered content in content analysis? The content that we need to analyze in content analysis is any material that is used by people for different purposes. In content analysis, the material can sometimes not be originally intended for research. For example, a person can decide to analyze news articles covering the concept of gender for the past 20 years through content analysis. Content analysis is therefore performed on diverse forms of human communications such as photographs, printed documents, video or film, audio tapes, street signs, and social media content, among others. Another instance where we can use content analysis is to evaluate whether the language used in a certain set of advertisements shows biases towards gender roles. Now, one of the most prominent approaches to qualitative content analysis is summative content analysis. Summative content analysis involves coming up with phrases and words and looking to count their occurrence across raw data. In some instances, the researcher might also decide to count the latent meanings of words or themes that appear in data. For example, a researcher can decide to count the instances of both positive and negative exchanges that certain individuals experience in the workplace in order to determine whether such a workplace can be described as being generally positive. When using content analysis as a way of analyzing qualitative data, the researcher needs to make a decision on the units of analysis that will be counted. An example of units of analysis that are counted in content analysis includes words, themes, characters, paragraphs, items, concepts, and semantics. Kindly find an example of a study utilizing qualitative content analysis linked in the description. Let me interrupt this video for a minute and inform you of my services. My first type of service that I offer is consulting for anything related to qualitative data analysis using NVivo. You hop on a video call with me through Microsoft Teams or Zoom and I will help you become a pro with NVivo in a few hours. I also provide a done-for-you data analysis service. I do the manual coding and provide a data analysis report with the necessary visuals. Some kind of visuals I do include tables, hierarchy charts, and the framework matrix. Email or message me right now, details in the description. The second type of qualitative data analysis is narrative analysis. What does narrative analysis involve? Narrative analysis is a qualitative research approach that focuses on the stories that people tell and how people will communicate such stories. Narrative analysis is therefore ideal to study human experiences through the stories that people will share. So, what are the defining characteristics of narrative analysis? The defining characteristics of narrative analysis include a focus on stories. Narrative analysis uses stories as data, whether they come from interviews, field notes, oral tales, blogs, letters, or autobiographies. The text of the story forms the dataset. The second characteristic of narrative analysis is an emphasis on how stories are told. Narrative analysis looks at the language used, how the story is constructed, the linguistic tools, and the cultural context. The way a story is told is therefore important as the content in narrative analysis. The third characteristic of narrative analysis is the preservation of the narrative. Unlike some other qualitative approaches, narrative analysis preserves data in its original narrative form. Data is analyzed as a whole unit or narrative sequence That means that we do not seek to segment the data, for example, through coding in narrative analysis. Another characteristic of narrative analysis is it uses diverse approaches. There are various analytical approaches within narrative analysis, including sociological, psychological, linguistic, and literary perspectives. These approaches can be combined depending on the research question. Another characteristic of narrative analysis is context. Narrative analysis takes into account the context in which stories are told. It acknowledges the social, cultural, familial, linguistic, and institutional narratives that shape individual experiences. Another characteristic of narrative analysis is temporality. Narrative analysis considers the time of the experiences and how these experiences could influence the future. So, chronological collections and the sequencing of events are important. Another characteristic of narrative analysis is researchers' role. Researchers play an active role in constructing the story through their concepts, methods, and interpretation. The story is seen as co-authored by the researcher and the participants. Kindly find an example of a study utilizing narrative analysis linked in the description. Let's look at the third approach to qualitative data analysis, which is discourse analysis. What does discourse analysis involve? Discourse analysis is a qualitative research approach that focuses on the investigation of language, both written and oral, as it is used. So discourse analysis differs from textual analysis in that it assumes from the outset that language is invested. This means that language is not a neutral tool for transmitting a message, but rather constitutes a particular way of talking about and understanding the world. In discourse analysis, language is viewed as the topic of research rather than the means to access people's views or attitudes. Discourse analysts study the way texts are constructed, the functions they serve in different contexts, and the contradictions that run through them. So, what are the defining characteristics of discourse analysis? One, it's a focus on language use. Discourse analysis is centrally concerned with language. It examines how people use language to construct their accounts of their social world. This includes looking at the patterns in language use, such as the use of personal pronouns and the amount of verbal space a speaker occupies in a conversation. Discourse analysis moves beyond a simple psycholinguistic or sociolinguistic understanding of the language. The second defining characteristic of discourse analysis is social construction of meaning. Discourse analysis explores how discourses construct or constitute social reality and social relations by creating meanings and perceptions. The focus is not merely on what is said or which words are used, but on the social construction and comprehensions of meanings created through discourse. The third characteristic of discourse analysis is discourse as social practice. Discourse analysis views language use as a form of social practice. It explores the links between language use and sociocultural practices. Discourse analysis is concerned with the social production and effects of discourses. Another characteristic of discourse analysis is it's beyond textual analysis. Discourse analysis assumes that all communicative events constitute a way of talking about and understanding the world. Another characteristic of discourse analysis is power dynamics. Discourse analysis pays attention to the more socially constituted forms of discursive power. It examines the social construction of difference and authority. It considers how language is used to shape meanings and give rise to social practices and relations. Critical discourse analysis examines the exercise of power by those who control resources. Another characteristic of discourse analysis is contextual analysis. Discourse analysis considers the context in which language is used. It recognizes the importance of cultural specific ways of speaking and writing and how thoughts are organized. Discourse analysis examines the social context of what is said. Another key characteristic of discourse analysis is persuasion. Discourse analysis focuses on the strategies of persuasion used in discourse. It considers how discourse is organized to make itself persuasive. Another characteristic of discourse analysis is that it's an iterative process. So discourse analysis involves immersion in the sources and becoming so familiar with them that their assumptions and themes become obvious. The analysis may involve multiple readings and development of structured questions to ask of the data. Discourse analysts iteratively consider past research and emergent codes. Kindly find an example of a study utilizing discourse analysis linked in the description. The fourth approach of qualitative data analysis is thematic analysis. What does thematic analysis involve? Thematic analysis is a flexible and widely used qualitative data analysis approach that focuses on identifying, analyzing, and interpreting patterns of meanings or themes within qualitative data. It's considered a foundational method for qualitative analysis. Thematic analysis can be used irrespective of the philosophical position of the research, and it can be used with both deductive and inductive approaches to research. In deductive approach to thematic analysis, we have preconceived themes that we seek to find in given dataset. In an inductive approach to thematic analysis, themes are derived from the data itself. This involves a ground-up approach that begins with segmenting the data into codes and then looking for a pattern of shared meaning across the codes to form themes. The main essence of themes is then reported in the findings. In a previous video, I went deep into the differences between inductive and deductive approaches to thematic analysis. Find the video linked in the description. Now, what are the defining characteristics of thematic analysis? Number one, identifying themes. The central goal of thematic analysis is the search for recurring themes or patterns within a dataset. Themes are broad units of information that consist of several codes aggregated to form a common idea. This can be identified by coding qualitative data, where codes are labels or short phrases applied to segments of the data that seem important. So themes can be derived from the data itself, inductive, or from pre-existing theory, deductive. The second characteristic of thematic analysis is flexibility. Thematic analysis is a flexible approach that can be adapted to different research questions and data types. Thematic analysis is not tied to a particular philosophical or theoretical position, and it can be used in realist and interpretivist studies. Another characteristic of thematic analysis is that it's a systematic approach. Thematic analysis offers a systematic yet flexible way to analyze data. It provides an orderly and logical way to analyze qualitative data. Another characteristic of thematic analysis is data immersion. The process of thematic analysis usually begins with researchers immersing themselves in the data by reading and rereading their transcripts or other textual materials. This helps analysts to become familiar with the content and identify potential patterns and codes. Another characteristic of thematic analysis is coding. After immersion, the researcher systematically codes the data. This involves identifying interesting features of the data and assigning labels or codes to them. Coding helps in organizing the data into manageable units. Another characteristic of thematic analysis is theme development. Codes are then examined to identify broader themes. Themes represent recurring patterns or concepts that are relevant to the research questions. This can involve grouping codes together and identifying relationships between codes. Themes may have subthemes which relate to the main theme. Another characteristic of thematic analysis is interpretation. After themes are identified, the researcher then interprets their meaning in relation to the research question, and they may connect findings to the existing literature. The interpretation may also involve describing the essence of each theme and how themes relate to each other. Another defining characteristic of thematic analysis is presentation. Findings of thematic analysis are usually presented in a narrative format with rich descriptions and supporting evidence from the data. These may be presented in a hierarchical or network structure to show the relationships between them. Kindly find an example of a study utilizing thematic analysis linked in the description. The fifth approach to qualitative data analysis is grounded theory. What does grounded theory involve? Grounded theory data analysis is a systematic, inductive approach that aims to develop a theory from data. It involves a cyclical process of data collection and analysis. The analysis begins with the data and develops into more abstract categories and theories. It's an iterative process where researchers move back and forth between data collection and analysis. So what are the defining characteristics of grounded theory analysis? Number one, constant comparative method. This is a core strategy where data segments are compared to identify similarities and differences and grouped into tentative categories. These comparisons are constantly made within and between levels of conceptualization until a theory is formulated. The second key characteristic of grounded theory analysis is coding. Data analysis in grounded theory uses a process of coding to develop a theory. This includes open coding, which is the initial stage of coding where data is broken down into conceptual units and labeled with codes, which involves line-by-line analysis and asking questions like, what is this data a study of and what category does this incident indicate? Another characteristic of grounded theory is theoretical sampling. Data collection is guided by the emerging theory, with the researcher strategically selecting new participants or data sources to fill gaps and develop weak spots in their theories. Sampling will continue until theoretical saturation is reached, meaning no new information is emerging from the data. Another defining characteristic of grounded theory analysis is memos. Throughout the research process, researchers write memos to record their ideas, insights, and evolving understanding of the data. This memo writing aids in the development of grounded theory. Another defining characteristic of grounded theory analysis is theory generation. So the ultimate goal of grounded theory analysis is to generate a theory that is grounded in the data, which means the theory emerges from and is supported by the data. This theory might be presented as a visual model, a set of hypotheses, or as a discussion. The theory should explain a process, action, or interaction related to the research topic. Kindly find an example of a study utilizing grounded theory analysis linked in the description. The sixth approach to qualitative data analysis is interpretive phenomenological analysis, IPA. What does IPA involve? Interpretive phenomenological analysis is a qualitative research approach that delves into how individuals make sense of their lived experiences, emphasizing the unique perspective of each participant within their specific context. IPA is characterized by a double hermeneutic, where the researcher interprets not only the participant's experience, but also the participant's interpretation of that experience. So what are the defining characteristics of interpretive phenomenological analysis, IPA? Number one, it focuses on lived experiences. IPA aims to deeply understand how individuals experience and make sense of significant life events. So IPA seeks to uncover the meanings that experiences hold for individuals, acknowledging that these meanings guide actions and interactions. The second characteristic of interpretive phenomenological analysis is that it's double hermeneutic. IPA involves two levels of interpretation. The researcher interprets the participants' understanding of their experience, acknowledging that there is no subjective reality outside of its interpretation. The goal is not to find an objective truth, but to grasp how participants make sense of their own experiences. Another characteristic of interpretive phenomenological analysis, IPA, is that it's an ideographic approach. IPA focuses on the particular, valuing the unique experiences of each individual rather than aiming for generalizable findings. In this regard, IPA seeks to understand the lived experiences of a participant on their own terms, respecting the complexity of the individual's interpretation of that experience. Another defining characteristic of IPA is data collection. Semi-structured interviews are the primary method of data collection in IPA. These interviews use open-ended questions to explore the participants' feelings, perceptions, and understandings of the phenomenon being studied. The interview is not a neutral tool for collecting data, but rather a part of the interpretive process. Another characteristic of interpretive phenomenological analysis, IPA, is reflexivity. In IPA, researchers reflect on their own experiences and biases related to the phenomenon to ensure their own viewpoints do not unduly influence their analysis. The process of bracketing or setting aside personal viewpoints helps the researcher to focus on the experiences of the participants. Kindly find an example of a study utilizing interpretive phenomenological analysis linked in the description. Now, how do you choose a qualitative data analysis approach to use in your study? It's important to decide which qualitative data analysis approach to use in your study based on your research questions and objectives. It's also advisable to use an uncomplicated approach if you are a beginner. One of the easiest approaches to learn as a beginner is thematic analysis. After you master thematic analysis, you can then venture into using other approaches of analyzing qualitative data as you grow as a researcher. Finally, check my other videos on how to conduct thematic analysis using NVivo to get a deeper understanding of this approach. Remember, I provide done-for-you data analysis services and consulting services for any problem or challenge related to NVivo. So check the link and email in the description and talk to me right away. Thank you.